I am Marcela Celorio, and from the Mexican consulate here in Los Angeles, I have the opportunity again to have a conversation with my dear friend, Mónica Ramírez. If you remember, at the beginning of the pandemic, we were very concerned about the rights of the essential workers, particularly farm workers. So we had a conversation with Mónica, and she highlighted the importance to provide with the PPE, the personal protection equipment against COVID-19, and keep on lobbying in Washington, D.C., and recognizing and give our thanks to these workers. So, Monica, I would like to ask you, 9 months after, what is our position? What should we be aware of?
So there are several critical things that we need people to know 9 months later into this pandemic. First of all, it's a critical situation. The aid that was available in some of the early months that organizations like ours were able to provide has become harder to come by. So we know families are starting to face eviction. We know that families are running out of food. We know that lots of farm worker women have not been able to go back to work or to keep their jobs because they are trying to keep up with their children's education. People are feeling very, very stressed, and they have questions about how they're going to actually be able to make it through this. And that is after farm workers continue to work through the wildfires, and that is after hundreds of farm workers have contracted COVID around the country, and some have died. It's been a very difficult time. The other thing I think is important for people to know is that the circumstances under which farm workers have been asked to work during COVID are not being reflected in the media. You know, I'll give you an example of a case that I worked on in the summer. I received a call from a woman in Mexico whose husband was here as a guest worker working in the state of Georgia. And she called me because she said her husband was having trouble breathing and he needed help. And it turned out that he was one among hundreds of guest workers from Mexico who had contracted COVID, and they weren't able to get help because the farmer where they worked had the camps where they were living guarded. There were guards who were keeping them from being able to leave the camp in order to get help. So we had a situation in which workers who were very ill were still working and were not able to get the aid or the health care that they needed. This is happening now. It's not something that is made up. It's not something that is, you know, we're not talking about a movie script. We're talking about reality. And the last thing I would say is that from the beginning of this pandemic, women have experienced COVID in a very different way, and that not only are we having more responsibilities in the home with caretaking and with education and such, but you know we're losing our jobs. 1 million women left the workforce between the month of August and September, and the highest number of women that left the workforce in that period of time were Latinas, and many of those were employed in low-paid positions. And so for someone like me who does work on economic justice and economic security, we have big questions about how we're going to be able to help Latina workers and some of these lower paid workers get back to work so they can actually have what they need to be able to survive.
Thank you so much for all the work you do. And another issue of concern, Monica, now that we have a vaccine, is who's going to be first. And I think that essential workers and farm workers should be the first in line to get the vaccine.
You know, we agree that essential workers should be among the first. It's based on the conversations that we're hearing, that doesn't seem to be what's going to happen. And I would say that it's farm workers and all food workers, because we also saw workers in poultry plants and meat processing plants that were getting sick at very high rates. And so I would say across the food industry. And I think that the government needs to take this seriously. We are potentially facing widespread food insecurity for our country. And I don't think that people are acknowledging that reality. And so we need to make sure that farm workers and other food workers are prioritized. But if it's anything like what we saw with testing, there are many communities where farm workers live where tests were never available. So we need to make sure that if farm workers and other essential workers are not at the very top of the list for the vaccine, that they're close to the top of the list, because we can't keep sending workers to work every day, taking risks for all of us with the very real possibility that they might get sick and some might pass away. I heard somebody say the other day that for many essential workers, work has become a death sentence, and that can't be the reality.
Of course, definitely, if they're not in top of the list, that will be a public policy mistake, but mainly an injustice. So thank you so much, Monica, and hope to see you soon in better circumstances.
Thank you so much. And thank you for all of your leadership. You know, we need to make sure that we are working together as activists, advocates, everyday community people, governments, all of the different agencies. We're not going to be able to solve these problems by ourselves. We've got to do it together.
Indeed. Thank you, Monica.
Thank you.